1975 South Boston. James Whitey Bulger is king of these streets. Everyone in the Irish neighborhood knows his name, but no one knows his secret. He is Boston's most feared gangster and the FBI's most valuable and secret informant. He protects his empire built on murder, extortion, and cocaine through deals with the FBI. Whitey's one mistake will force the FBI to launch a 16-year manhunt to capture him.
The FBI still got it done.
Took 16 years.
Took 16 years. Yeah, this was not a typical fugitive.
During this period, he ranked just below Osama bin Laden on the FBI's most wanted list. Whitey Bulger is the story of one of America's most cunning gangsters, a devil who even fooled the FBI.
What were they like?
They were like the nice, retired old couple that lived in the apartment next to me.
Good tenants?
Excellent tenants. Never complained, always paid rent on time.
In cash?
In cash.
They had nothing, and they never went out. They never had food delivered. She never dressed nicely.
You thought they were poor?
Yes, without a doubt.
The people who said these words were Whitey's building manager, Josh Bond, and his neighbor, Janice Goodwin. This interview was part of a documentary made for 60 Minutes. Another neighbor, Barbara Gluck, described him as follows.
She would, you know, pet it and be sweet to it, and then she would put a plate of food, like, out here.
Mm-hmm. And she liked the cat?
Obviously. She loved the cat. And we all liked the cat, but she was taking care of the cat.
No one who met him for the first time would ever have guessed they were facing a serial killer and one of history's most notorious mafia bosses. So how did this seemingly quiet and unassuming man become one of the world's most feared and the FBI's most wanted gangsters? James Whitey Bulger was born in Dorchester in 1929. Growing up on the tough streets of South Boston, Bulger was the child of an Irish family living in poverty. When his father lost his job, the family struggled to make ends meet. This situation pushed Bulger onto the streets. At 14, he joined a robbery gang. He started by stealing food from grocery stores and slashing car tires to distract attention. His intelligence and courage quickly earned him respect within the gangs. Although he ran into trouble with the police, he managed to avoid arrest. This cunning was the first step that rapidly elevated him in Boston's underworld. In the 1,970 seconds, Kevin Weeks, who worked as a doorman at a bar, was well known as a street fighter. He caught Bulger's attention and they became friends. This friendship lasted for 20 years, and Weeks became Bulger's partner and right-hand man.
You seem to have committed every crime in the book. Let me know if I've got all of this right. You beat people up?
Yes.
Put them in the hospital?
Yes.
Shot, stabbed people?
Yes.
Helped kidnap people?
Yes.
And you were an accessory to murders?
Correct.
That's quite a resume.
It's the business we're in.
Weeks was a criminal mastermind alongside Bulger. 98% of his waking hours were spent on crime, 2% on entertainment. There was no drinking, gambling, or drugs, only murder. Weeks assisted Bulger in 3 murders. One of these victims was John McIntyre, a gun smuggler who cooperated with the police.
Joe McIntyre was originally strangled, but the rope was too thick, so he was gagging. So Jimmy shot him in the head, and then he pulled his teeth, and we buried him.
Pulled his teeth?
Yes.
Why?
Back then there was dental records. There was no DNA.
So that was to prevent people from being
identified.
No regrets about the loss of life you're responsible for?
No.
As Weeks said, they felt no remorse. Bulger's murder methods were brutal: stabbing, beating with a club, shooting, strangulation, running over with a car. After killing someone, he would calm down for weeks. He would relieve his stress, says Weeks, but Bulger had no intention of stopping. Another target he wanted to kill was Howie Carr. Carr was a hard-hitting columnist for the Boston Herald, and for 20 years, he was Bulger's biggest headache.
Whitey Bulger is a serial killer, cocaine dealer, bank robber, pedophile, very smart criminal.
Did you consider him a worthy adversary? I mean, is that why you went after him so hard?
I went after Whitey just because I couldn't believe he was getting away with what he was doing and that nobody would write about it.
They set out to kill Kari by making a plan over several weeks. Bulger's initial plan was straight out of a horror movie. He would fill a basketball with C4 explosives and blow up the house when he left. But then he realized innocent people could die, so he scrapped the plan. But he hadn't given up. This time, he devised a much more personal plan. He decided to eliminate Carr. Bulger's most trusted man, Weeks, lay in wait at the cemetery at exactly 5:30 a.m. His target would be leaving from there. Minutes later, Carr appeared. Everything was ready, but Carr wasn't alone. He had a young girl with him, probably his daughter. Everything froze in that moment. Weeks didn't pull the trigger. He lowered his gun and disappeared into the darkness.
And he had his daughter with him. I assume it was his daughter, young girl. He's holding her by the hand, going to his car. So I had to pass on it. And then...
Why'd you have to pass?
Yeah, I didn't want to kill him in front of his daughter.
You had him in your sights?
Yeah.
So if he had come out the door by himself, he'd be a dead man.
Yeah.
For 20 years, Weeks and Bulger were virtually untouchable. The reason was their close ties to paid FBI agents in the Boston police. The most critical figure was Agent John Connolly. Every profit, every dirty job was divided into 5 parts. The 5th part, it went directly to law enforcement. This ensured that investigations, witnesses, and crucial information always leaked to them. Connolly wasn't just taking money. He was giving Bulger the names of informants. And the informants always met the same fate, the grave. But the alliance wasn't just about sharing information. Bulger's gang gambled, sold drugs, and silenced people through blackmail. The system was simple. Get the information, eliminate the enemy, split the money. But no system lasts forever. In 1994, 2 days before Christmas, a single phone call turned everything upside down. The person on the other end of the line was Connolly again.
They're going after him. Why? An arrest warrant had been issued for him on charges of robbery and organized crime. I'm ready.
Fake IDs had already been prepared. Between $30 and $50 million awaited him in bank vaults. The escape plan had been in place for years. Weeks transported the fake IDs from Boston to New York. The meetings were brief and secretive. Phone calls were always coded. They used code words for meetings. For example, if they were meeting in New York, they would say, "Let's meet at the Lions." This was a reference to the 2 lions in front of the New York Public Library. Weeks last saw Bulger in New York in 1996. Bulger said, "I'll be in touch," but never called again. And Weeks learned a truth that might change criminal history. Whitey Bulger had been a high-level informant for the FBI since 1975 and had deceived everyone.
He betrayed me the whole time. He betrayed all of us.
Tell me how he betrayed all of you.
Well, we knew we were paying for information, that we had sources in law enforcement. So as far as we were concerned, the relationship was one way. We were receiving information, we were paying for the information. Now we find out he's given information.
So he was giving up some of his own people?
He was giving up some of his own people, he was giving up the competition, he basically, he made a deal with the FBI. They gave him carte blanche to do what he wanted.
Whitey Bulger's tip to the FBI led to Weeks' arrest. Charged with 29 crimes in 1999, Weeks faced life in prison. When his closest friend Bulger abandoned him, he realized escape was impossible and decided to cooperate.
So what did you do?
We made a deal to sit down and talk. They wanted proof that I was telling the truth. So I led them to 3 bodies.
Weeks knew about some of the murders Bulger had committed and showed the police where the bodies were. 6 bodies were found. As a result, Bulger faced 20 new murder charges. In exchange, Weeks served only 72 months in prison and was released in 2005. But alongside Whitey Bulger, there was a friend who was far more ruthless and dangerous than Weeks, John Martirano.
Did you keep count of how many people you killed?
Never. Until in the end, I never realized it was that many.
How many?
A lot. Too many.
Do you have a number?
I confessed to 20 in court.
Sure you remembered them all?
I hope so.
In the 1,970 seconds, Martirano's circle of friends and family had become involved with the Winter Hill Gang, led by the notorious Irish mob boss, Whitey Bulger. Martirano was a partner in shady dealings, such as gambling, loan sharking, extortion, and murder. Martirano's specialty was resolving conflicts, so much so that one day, with the police across the street, he could walk into a crowded bar and shoot someone in broad daylight. He managed to evade the police by keeping a low profile. By 1978, Martirano had killed 18 people and was charged with horse racing fraud. He fled to Florida, hiding under the name Richard O'Coin. Years later, Bulger called him for a major hit. The target was Roger Wheeler, a wealthy executive at the Southern Hills Country Club in Tulsa. Wheeler was the CEO of T-Lux Corporation and the owner of the World High Betting Company, which Bulger was trying to control. Martirano got information for the assassination from former Boston FBI agent Paul Rico.
Waited for him to finish playing golf. I had an update when he was going to his tee time.
You knew what he looked like?
I had his description from Rico.
How many times did you shoot him?
Once.
Did you shoot him between the eyes?
Yeah, around there.
Martirano said it wasn't the first or last time he'd gotten information from the FBI. Corrupt Boston agent John Conley had been an accomplice for years, while his partner John Callahan had said he would report the Wheeler murder. Martirano was his 20th and final victim.
Do you think that John Conley knew that you were going to kill Callahan?
Sure. He said it. He said, we're all going to go to jail the rest of our life if this guy doesn't get killed.
And this is an FBI agent telling you this?
This is an FBI agent telling it to Whitey, telling me.
In 1995, Martirano was indicted on organized crime charges. In court, Martirano learned that his associates had provided information to the FBI. Thanks to Martirano's testimony, 19 murders were solved. Martirano helped solve approximately 40 murders, including the 20 he confessed to. He made a deal with the federal government, served only 12 years in prison, and returned to the streets of Boston. Meanwhile, Bulger had deceived everyone and managed to escape. The FBI began preparing an extraordinary operation to capture Bulger. James Whitey Bulger had moved to Santa Monica, California in the mid-1990s, while living on the run with his girlfriend Catherine Gregg. During this period, they used aliases to conceal their identities. Bulger's alias was Charlie Gascoigne, and his girlfriend Catherine Gregg's alias was Carol Gasco. Under these names, they lived in Santa Monica as a retired couple. They were a quiet couple. Their neighbors said about them,
What were they like?
They were like the nice, retired old couple that lived in the apartment next to me.
Good tenants?
Excellent tenants. Never complained, always paid rent on time.
In cash?
In cash.
They had nothing, and they never went out. They'd never had food delivered. She never dressed nicely.
You thought they were poor?
Yes, without a doubt.
Bulger had almost vanished from the face of the earth. The biggest problem for the FBI was that there were no good photographs of him and his girlfriend, Catherine Gregg. The couple's love of animals was frequently noted by the FBI, and veterinarians and doctors were asked to keep an eye out for them. There were reports that Gregg had once had breast augmentation surgery and other cosmetic procedures in Boston. That's why the FBI contacted the doctor.
I was trying to leave the office a little early to catch one of my kids' ball games, and I said, well, listen, I'm going to swing by in the morning and pick those up. And they said to me, do you want the photos too? And I said, you have photos? And they said, yeah, we have photos. I said, we'll be there in 15 minutes.
Catherine Gregg's breast implant clue led to the discovery of high-resolution photographs and played a critical role in solving the case. The FBI changed its strategy and focused on Bulger's girlfriend to catch him. The next morning, on the 20th of June 2011, the Special Task Force targeted Whitey Bulger and Catherine Gregg in Santa Monica. They were living in apartment 303. By noon, agents had set up surveillance points and gathered information from neighbors.
He closed the door, threw down a folder, and opened it up and said, are these the people that live in apartment 303?
Did you say anything when you saw the pictures?
My initial reaction was, holy
You're living next door to a gangster.
Well, I still didn't really know who he was.
The operation had begun. Bond informed the FBI that Bulger's door was off limits. A note had been posted on the door asking not to be disturbed. The garage cabinet was labeled Gasco and 303. The manager called to say someone needed to come check if the cabinet had been broken into and if anything was missing. Gregg said his wife would be right over. When Bulger came downstairs, the police surrounded him and handcuffed him. His 16-year escape had come to an end, but the story didn't end there because Bulger faced dreadful days in prison. After Bulger was captured, he received 2 life sentences and an additional 5 years of supervised release. Gregg, meanwhile, received an 8-year sentence. Bulger was initially sent to the USP Coleman II Federal Penitentiary in Florida, the Central Florida Prison, in 2014. Bulger was later transferred to the USP Hazleton Federal Penitentiary on the 29th of October 2018 due to health issues and prison security concerns. However, his last 24 hours were quite horrific. this was one of the most dangerous places for informants and Mafia turncoats. For Whitey Bulger, both a Mafia boss and an FBI informant, this prison was not safe at all. News of his arrival spread quickly. The inmates were furious. Insults and shouts echoed off the concrete walls. For many, this was the moment they had been waiting for years. Some openly shouted "snitch" at him. When Bulger was placed in a cell, an unexpected decision was made. He was put in the same cell, not with a dangerous mob boss, but with 6-year-old Felix Wilson. Wilson was a minor offender with no ties to gangs, who had received a 30-month sentence for illegal possession of a firearm during a bicycle search. The section where Bulger was held contained inmates connected to his family who harbored hatred toward informants. Normally, this would not have been considered a major threat, but Bulger had used the FBI for years and had sold out many of his rivals. This had created deep animosity towards him, especially among the Italian-American Mafia and other gangs. Bulger's betrayal of rival gangs as an FBI informant was an unforgivable crime. Informants were the most hated figures in this culture. Fotios Fredigias was a hitman who harbored hatred for informants. Killing Bulger was both revenge and a matter of Mafia honor for him. Paul DeCalogero, meanwhile, had learned of Bulger's prison transfer in advance and told other inmates, "We'll kill him as soon as he arrives at the unit." On the morning of October 30, after 6 a.m., the sound of doors opening was heard. His cellmate was the first to come out. Cameras recorded 2 people entering the cell, Fotios Fredigias and Paul DeCalogero. Due to staff shortages, the cameras were not being monitored at the time. The 2 attackers reached Bulger with almost no resistance. As soon as Fotis and Paul entered the room, Bulger brutally beat him. The attackers tried to cut out his tongue and gouge out his eyes. This was the traditional punishment given to informants. Then they wrapped his body in a blanket, placed his head on a pillow, and left him as if he were sleeping. They left the cell at 6:26 a.m. When the staff entered the cell after the shift change, they found Bulger covered in blood. His body was unrecognizable. Despite all efforts, he could not be saved and died at the age of 89.